Hello and welcome to another What Pilots Don't Tell You. Today we're going to talk about turbulence. If we've flown in a plane, we've probably all experienced this, and turbulence is caused by two main reasons. One is mechanical, which is trees, terrain and structures, and also thermal, which is caused by heating of the ground, as we've discussed in a previous video. We've also looked at ground speed and airspeed and how they compete with each other a little bit. But today, with thermals, there's a little bit of a relationship. So let's have a look at it now. So what I've got here first of all, and let's just separate these two boards, two pictures, two separate things. So here we're going to have a look at mechanical turbulence. What is mechanical turbulence? Well, in the previous video, again, about ground speed, airspeed, we discussed about how airspeed is often obviously different to ground speed if there's wind. If we're heading into the wind, the aircraft travels slower across the ground, and if we're heading with the wind, it's faster. So thermal turbulence and mechanical turbulence actually change the direction of the air flow and therefore will affect the aircraft performance and in terms of speed and also altitude, lift, things like that. So with the air approach changing in speed coming towards the aircraft, of course the aircraft's going to respond to it in different ways, and we might have, for example, air coming into the aircraft this way, which is going to cause the aircraft to lift and slow down, or if the air is coming from behind, then it's going to cause the aircraft to speed up, but also lose some and probably speed up because it's being pushed. But initially it's going to be the wing's going to feel a reduced airspeed across it, which can cause it to descend. Okay, so with those things in mind, what is mechanical turbulence? Well, first of all, mechanical turbulence, here we have three different items as I've discussed. We've got terrain, which is this mountain, not really well drawn, but you get the point. And we've got some trees, a forest perhaps. We actually have a bit of a bush, forest, some trees. Most airports have structures, hangars, but trees near the airport, which when the wind blows from that direction affects the way the wind comes across the runways. And that's really important, especially when you're low level and you're landing and you're just got it all lined up and smooth, and then you hit the mechanical turbulence from the trees and everything gets a bit wobbly. So what happens with the wind across the trees? Mechanical turbulence is pretty much the same across any structure. And what that is basically the wind's coming across, it's all smooth. That's if nothing upstream has already hit it. So the wind comes across, and as it goes across, it gets into these rotors. And that changing direction of the air is where we experience turbulence. So if we were flying through here, for example, we'd get pushed around and nudged around in quite a bad way. So trees are a fairly low level mechanical turbulence, as are hangars at airports. But what about skyscrapers? What about buildings in cities? What about, let's draw another example. This is going to be really bad, but you've all seen these days. So this is one of those wind generators, if you can understand it. But anyway, you get the point. So the wind hits this and it turns it around, but as it comes out, it gets all swirled up as well. So flying through here is going to cause us some grief as well. And over buildings, so again, the same as the trees, the wind comes over the building and it swirls around in here. So if you were going to fly through here, if you're going to fly through there, you'd get really pushed around. In fact, you could even be pushed into the building. Another thing is helicopters. Okay, there's a helipad on top of this building. Helicopters are less susceptible because of the speed of the rotor blade through the air relative to the change in direction of the air and turbulence. So a helipad on top of a building is above the rotor behind the building. So this would be the lee side, downwind side, and the helicopter therefore coming in here is experiencing laminar airflow. In fact, with the wind direction that way, we would see the helicopter coming in from that direction. All right, and last of all, we've got a mountain. Now, mountains and valleys create all sorts of complicated wind flow effects, and this mountain is no different, and we might have wind hitting down here. So we might have low-level winds here, coming across, and of course they've got to go somewhere. Now, they can go over the top, obviously, so they get pushed up by the terrain over the top and then back down the other side. Some of this will result in rotors, and some of it will just go over nice and laminar, but it will push you down on the other side. But this isn't what we're talking about. We're not talking about downdraft, we're talking about turbulence, but that is something else to be aware of. So as we go over the mountain with the wind, it gets pushed around and rolls out, and this area here is definitely not a good place to be. Now, wind can also go around mountains, and this is called accelerated airflow. I'm making that up, but you get the point. So as it goes around, it gets accelerated around the mountain, and then it comes out. So you'll get wind streams going around the mountain like that. So as it goes through, funneled, if it gets funneled between two mountains into a valley, it will accelerate through, and that can cause vortices and rotors, and all sorts of other problems as well. I hope that for you addresses the mechanical turbulence. Now let's have a look at the thermal turbulence. Now, in a previous video we looked at thermals, and we talked about the rising air currents. As air rises, it pushes air away and more air descends to take its place, or it gets pulled in from the sides. Now, changing direction of air causes problems for aircraft and turbulence again. So this turbulence, in this case, we've got a lovely beach scene. So here's the water, here's the sand. I'm going to do the sand in red, but you get the point. We'll just do a few lines like that. The breakers on the beach here, and you've got the land. So what's a sea breeze? So a sea breeze is it changes during the day. So in the morning it's in one direction, and in the afternoon it changes direction, normally around about midday, when the ground temperature in relation to the water temperature changes relative to each other. And how does that happen? Well, water temperature is generally fairly constant through the day. Well, it is. And air temperature, as you know, in the morning is cool, warms up through the day, gets ground affected, gets thermally heated, and it will rise in temperature and peaks around about 1:32 in the afternoon, generally speaking, depending on where you are. So what happens is this temperature of the water, let's do this in black, might stay a constant. We're in Queensland, but I'll still put, let's just say 18 degrees. In the morning, we might start with a cool temperature. On the land, we might be, say, 20 kilometres inland. Okay, we'll put 20 kilometres. And that temperature in the morning might start at, like, say, 5 degrees. Let's do it in black. Oh no, let's do it in that. So that's 5 degrees Celsius. Now, as the day goes on, the temperature rises. And let's just say, actually let's talk about this first. So thermal activity, if we only talk about thermal activity, we're not talking about wind. So if it's a calm day, we still get winds because of sea breeze effect. Now the wind will be, the thermals will rise off here because they'll be dragged off the water because warm air rises. So this water is warming up the air above it, which causes it to rise. And this air here is being drawn out to the sea as this air rises. Now air rises, as you see in the other video, because of the air around it. it's cooler. If the ambient air around the temperature source, the heat source, if the air is cooler than the heat source, then the air heated will rise in that cooler air, and that's what's happening here. So it goes up, and it has to be filled with other air to flow into it, which is this cooler air. So let's put a cool air going in. So this air now drags air down from up here. And that then, of course, drags in this warm air. Okay, so now we've got a wind direction going inland, an inland breeze. Now in the afternoon, this temperature remains 18 degrees all through the day. But in the afternoon, the land temperature is heated up. And it might peak during the day at, say, 25 degrees. So now our land is at 25 degrees. And now what happens? At some point during the day, mid-afternoon or midday, because of this temperature equalizing and then rising, so at one point in time there's obviously, this is going to be 18 degrees, and once it goes past 18 degrees we get a reversal. And so a sea breeze is actually known to exist because the wind reverses through the day. Every day this cycle occurs. So now what happens? Well, I think I've given the game away here, but you can see what happens. Now the air starts to rise here. And this now pushes, drags air in off the ocean, cool air. Let's mess it up. So cool air comes in off the ocean, and the warm air that rose will now go this way as it's dragged down back to the ocean here. And the cycle is now that way. Whereas the morning cycle was that way. So we can say that is AM and this would be PM. So our wind direction changes, and this can go up to about 100 kilometers inland. Now you can see this if you look at satellite pictures through the day and you can see clouds. Sometimes you can see the clouds at some point in the day change direction. It's quite interesting. So all day the clouds are moving inland, and then at some point midday they stop and then they go the other way, and that's sea breeze. Sea breeze obviously only occurs near the water, being huge lakes and of course the ocean. Hope you've enjoyed that. I've made a great mess here. Next time we'll look at how turbulence and everything affects the stall, and why stalls and wind gradients as well. We'll talk about wind shear, vertical wind shear. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll look forward to talking with you next time. See you next time.